My guest today is known to be the lead singer and lead guitarist of the power trio Athanasia, the first album of the band called The Order of the Silver Compass, and it will be released next March 15. Please welcome Caleb Bingham. Hey Caleb, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is for me. First, how music came in your life?
Well, I've been playing music on one instrument or another since I was about 6 years old. Kind of grew up listening to classical music, moved on into blues and jazz and hard rock, classic rock, and then into metal and speed thrash, faster, harder from there, you know.
If you have to name only one person that influenced your music style, who is?
Well, that's a hard question because I'm like a sponge and I kind of soak up a little bit of everything that I'm exposed to, regardless of what it is. As far as maybe one big influence,
Okay.
I picked up the guitar for the first time after hearing the music of Jimi Hendrix as a kid. I had never really heard anybody make sounds like that on a guitar before. My mind was honestly sort of blown away by it, and I decided then and there that I wanted to learn how to make those sounds and make music that was as moving to other people as, you know, the music of Hendrix was to me growing up listening to it.
You've been in the band Five Finger Death Punch before you begin your new project, Athanasia. What can you tell us about this era with the Five Finger Death Punch and the end of you with the band?
I was with them very early on. I joined them fresh out of high school when I was 18. They were the first serious band, shall we say, that I ever played with, you know, outside of just local garage bands around town with schoolmates and such. I always knew from a very, very young age that I wanted to pursue music in a very serious level professionally. I'd never really questioned wanting to do anything else with my life. I tried out for a good number of bands around that time in the LA area and outside of it. And out of all the ones I tried out for at that time, I felt that Five Finger Death Punch was seemingly the most serious and had the most potential, I thought, to move forward. So I joined them. I ended up working with them on material that would become their first two albums in various roles, not only, you know, playing guitar, obviously, but doing some writing and also some engineering. It was definitely a learning experience working with guys that were, you know, a little more seasoned and established in the music world. You know, I improved very quickly for my age because I had to in order to keep up with playing with these guys that were, you know, substantially older than myself. I was the youngest guy in the band by, probably a good 15, 20 years. You know, by the time they replaced me, I was 19, and on average, they were around 35-ish. But I don't think anyone involved had any idea how quickly things were going to snowball with that band. And, you know, once they released that single for The Bleeding online back in the day, it kind of went viral, and they had a huge response to it and ended up getting a major label offer. And once they signed, you know, of course, with signing to a major comes marketing and PR and all of these additional parties that are involved with making decisions about the band. And frankly, I don't know, because I wasn't privy to the conversation, who put forth the idea of getting rid of me first, but more or less, me being 19 at the time and them being all around 35 to 40 was sort of a bad look, you know, because in the nicest way possible, I guess I was kind of making them look too old, or vice versa, me being too young in a band of guys that were that much older than me. So I think that was a large part of that decision, just come down to image. And sadly, that's probably more important than the music in the music business in the 21st century. But in any case, even the guys in the band, when they did let me know that I was out, did mention that it really had nothing to do with music at all, and there was no bad blood, and no one was pissed off at me or anything. It just didn't work out at the time. Right time, right place, wrong age, shall we say.
Now, tell me the story of Athanasia. I know the band was called first Ascension before change to Athanasia. Why the change, and why it take a couple of years before the project really start?
Well, yeah, I did originally have a band called Ascension. I always called my band that name, even back in high school before I was even playing with Five Finger Death Punch. But over that many years, I just sort of evolved musically to the point where what I'm doing now with Athanasia doesn't really sound anything like what I was doing originally with Ascension. So I felt it would make a lot more sense to just disband and pick up with a new band name and just kind of leave that one to rest, And secondarily, I learned over the course of trying to promote a band called Ascension that it was nearly impossible to actually rank in search results online and such, because there are just so many other things out there with the name Ascension in the title, in whole or in part. So I felt it was worth starting a new band under a new band name to try and have something a bit more memorable that was easier to search for online, a little more standout, So that's more or less what led to that decision. As far as why it's taken a couple of years to get Athanasia off the ground, I would like to sort of give a little insight to people who are listening here who are not involved with the music world, that there's a whole lot more that goes on behind the scenes than most people realize or give credit for, especially if you really want your bands to have a lasting success and put out a quality product. It takes, now more than ever, a large amount of careful strategic thinking as far as the concept, the branding, the artwork, having enough music videos and so on down the line, merchandise designs, and every little last detail has to be thought out in advance if you want things to snowball once you start up the machine. So we decided that we were going to do our homework and spend a good bit of time planning all of this out, filming multiple music videos, getting all of our artwork and branding and etc. all sorted out before we launched and attempted to put the record out. Secondarily, I should mention we actually in the process recorded a second album, so we've got that waiting in the wings for when us and the label decide to put it forward. But let's just say we're very well prepared for the longer haul with Athanasia.
Now, my opinion, I have listened 3 or 4 songs of your new band, and I have to say it sounds like a new fresh air in the metal world. I think we can say that you have maybe 3 or 4 different styles in the same album. What do you think about that?
Well, thanks. I'm very glad you think it's fresh. I was trying very, very hard to make something that was unlike what's going on in heavy metal these days. I feel a lot of what's going on in the genre is just very generic and regurgitated, and I'm very bored with it, and I think a lot of listeners are as well. And I'd like to contribute to stirring the musical pot a little bit and putting a fresh spin on the genre. And I think that, even within songs on this record, we'll shift gears and, have little bits and pieces of several things going on, changing very abruptly at times.
I know that it's very difficult to take its place in the music industry. Why do you think your music can be loved by a lot of fans and take a place in probably one of the most different clientele? So, take place in the metalhead gang?
Well, as we were just touching on, I do feel there's a little bit of something for everyone on this record. There's no lack of thrash and black and growls, screams, hooks, cool guitar solos, which I try to make very hooky and memorable as well. It's designed to be kind of a musical roller coaster, and I'd like to think there's a little bit of something for everyone who likes various styles of metal, from different schools. And it's very tough to stand out these days, as I was just touching on, how everybody's sort of doing more or less the same thing and sectioning off metal into all these very small subcategories, and there really isn't a band, or not very many of them, that have some sense of universal appeal that anyone who likes rock or metal music can get behind and say that they dig it, And I think we may have some of that going for us.
If you have to choose only one song of your project to introduce a person to the music of Athanasia, I'm curious, which song you would choose?
One song to sum up the band. That's tough, for sure.
It's like Choose a Baby.
Yeah, for sure. And, there's so much variance from one song to the next, and even within songs on the record, that it would be hard to narrow it down to one to give, someone who hadn't heard us before a grasp on what we're all about. With that in mind, the title track does have a good bit of the elements that make up Athanasia in it. It's got a heavy intro, it's got an up-tempo verse section with some thrash in it. It's got a real catchy, hooky chorus. It's got a progressive 7/4 section in the bridge, followed by a very shreddy, thrashy guitar solo. All in all, that might be a fairly good representation of the band in one song if listeners wanted to start from somewhere and decide from there if they were into the band or not.
Okay. Next one. Do you think do you think Athanasia can be playing in Quebec or Montreal in the next 1 or 2 years?
I'd certainly love to come up that way and play. I did a tour up there with another band. It's been a few years ago now, but really, really impressive metal scene up in Quebec. And I'd be happy to come up there and play for you guys anytime at all. Not to mention, Montreal is very cool, very beautiful city. And it would give me a good excuse to come back and eat some more of that good poutine in any case.
How do you see the future of your band?
Well, I'd like to take this band as far as we can take it. It would be amazing to eventually get to the point where we can play in front of large audiences in, arena or outdoor venues, big European festivals and so on. Before I started writing this record for the band, I sort of intended to go into that with writing music that would sound good in that format, very loud in front of a large audience. So I'd like to hopefully stick around with Athanasia long enough to matter that much to people to be able to have the opportunity to do something like that with the band. Certainly would be great.
Caleb Bingham, thank you for your time and long life to Athanasia.
Thanks very much, Gabriel, and thank you for the interview.
Thanks. Have a nice day.
You also, man. Cheers.